Council meeting for May 27, 2014 to order. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we'll adopt the agenda. Don, there's been a change.
Yeah, Mayor and members of the City Council, you have an amended agenda before you this evening. Item 9A under new business, the Mount Olivet Church West Campus request for a CUP. They have asked that it be tabled until our second meeting in June, which is June 23rd, so there will be no action on that item this evening.
And that's the only change?
That is correct.
Can I have a motion, please, to approve the amended agenda?
I move we approve the amended agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've adopted the amended agenda. Next is the open forum. This is the opportunity again for anyone to address council on items not on the current agenda.
Good evening. My name is Jane Penny, and my address is 1195 Lilac Circle in Victoria. When I first moved to Victoria, I was attending St. Victoria's Catholic Church, and I know some of you here are also members. And I received this one day in church, and I've kept it taped inside of my desk. It's from John 3:20 to 21. I think it's really appropriate. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come toward the light, so that his works might not be exposed. But whoever lives the truth comes to the light, so that his works may be clearly seen as done in God. The question that I have for you, Mayor, and some of your allies on the council are these two. Since when does an employee, which you are, of the citizens of this town have authority over his employer? What gives the slave the right to deny or disobey the will of the master? You are not kings and queens, divinely appointed by God to rule over his kingdom, but hirelings who exist only at and by the will of the people. My second question: since when does an elected or hired government official have the authority to disobey the law without consequence? The corrupt and evil days of this town, this county, this state, and country are coming to an end. People are tired of having half of their income taken from them by those seeking only to promote their own welfare. You are examples of this. It is your dishonorable actions that have caused the citizens to rise up against you. It is time for you to step down. You've had plenty of time to come clean and could have done the job you were elected to do. And you have failed. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. All items are approved under one motion unless any of the council members wishes to remove an item. Is there a motion, please?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the consent agenda. Next, item 6, the payment of the bills.
I move approval of the May 27, 2014 claims roster in the amount of $166,365.10.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we've approved the payment of the bills. Next item under the finance section is the first quarter 2014 financials. They're included as by way of information only. There's no council action required. Kelly's here if people have questions. This is a new format that we're using. Kelly, you might want to just, or Don, touch on what we're doing that's a little different than in the past.
Mayor and members of the City Council. So this evening is the first time we present quarterly financials, and I've asked Kelly to give a brief summary of the new format for the city council's information as well as for the public's information. So go ahead, Kelly.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Like Don had mentioned, this is the first time we've gone to a quarterly financial report versus a monthly financial report. We will still continue to do a monthly financial report for internal review. We'll do that to monitor things, make sure nothing looks like it's out of whack, but formally we'll present this to both the Finance Committee and the Council going forward. The Finance Committee did review this report at their May 14th meeting and recommended bringing it forward to the Council tonight. So the first couple pages of this report are a table of contents, and the intent on this is to provide a little more narrative and analysis than we've done in the past. This table of contents will show both the page number that a report is on, and then also indicate if there's something of note, and just provide an explanation of the various reports and charts that are contained in the report. So if we move on to page 1 of the report, this is a statement of revenues and expenditures comparing budget to actual for the general fund. These numbers are unaudited. The top section of this page shows revenues by type, and you can see at the top that taxes is the largest category that the city has. However, we do not receive our tax settlements until July and December of each year, so we're not going to show anything in that category until the third quarter. And then going a little farther down on the report, I've noted that for miscellaneous revenues, it's actually showing a negative number, and that is due to the reversal of accrued interest from last year. So as the year goes on, that number will move into positive territory. For expenditures, we've categorized everything by department. Some items of note for police and sheriff. We do not send that to the county until June and November each year, so that one is currently showing 0%. And then as you look towards the bottom of the report, you can see that there's 3 departments: recreation activities, parks and recreation, and park maintenance, and a lot of those expenditures don't occur until the summer months, so those are also showing low numbers. Overall, things are trending as expected. For revenues, the largest source of revenue that is not the property tax would be our licenses and permits category. That's primarily our building permits. And it's also our most volatile revenue source. We predict each year how many new home permits we're going to get, but we never really know for sure. So the next page of the report, on page 3, actually it's page 2, shows our various categories of building permit revenue for the year. The straight purple line going across the center of the line shows what our monthly budget amount would be. The orange line with the circles indicates what we received in revenue for 2013. So far for this year, we are on target to exceed our budget and also last year's revenues. For comparison purposes, through March of last year, we had issued 17 new home permits. Through March of this year, we've issued 23 new home permits, and we've budgeted 75 new home permits for the year. One of the things to consider when looking at overall revenues for the year is our contract with the City of Minnetrista for building inspections. We have given them notice that we are going to have to terminate that service due to workload. However, I still think we'll meet targeted budget for overall revenues for building inspections. We'll move on then to page 3, which is the statement of revenues and expenditures for the Victoria Recreation Center. Again, we do have a tax levy, a smaller tax levy for this fund, so we will not receive that until July and December. The second largest item in revenues is charges for services. And if you look at the chart at the bottom of the page, you can see that the majority of that money comes from the school district for the lease payment we have with them. And then we also receive revenues for memberships, daily passes, and gym rentals. And so far, those are performing very well, and we do not expect any budget shortfalls. In terms of expenditures, most of the items are performing as expected. The next few pages of the reports show our revenues and expenditures for our utility funds. So we have a water fund, a sewer fund, and a stormwater fund. The numbers in here do include our first quarter utility billing, so that includes revenues from January, February, and March. For the water fund, typically the second and third quarters have the largest revenue amounts, so the fact that we're at 15% of budget for water is to be expected. For revenues, we've broken down the categories of revenues between operating revenues, which is typically utility bill, service charges, compared to core revenues. And the core revenues come from new homes and developers applying for new plats. For the expenses, we've broken everything down by department. So we have a water operating department, a water treatment plant department, a water administration department, which is mainly our utility billing function, and then a water core department. Overall, expenses are performing as expected for the water fund. If you note at the bottom, we do have a rather significant ending cash balance. Through the end of the first quarter, it's almost 2.4 million, and we are setting aside funds for new water storage, and whether that will be a tower or underground reservoir is to be determined, and that is planned for 2015.
Excuse me, Kelly. How much is still owed, paying down the 13 acres and repaying that to the water fund?
It's about 783,000,
And how much of that is repaid each year?
150,000.
Thank you.
If we go on to page 5, this is the report for the sewer fund. For the sewer fund and the stormwater fund, our quarterly revenues are about the same. They don't fluctuate from season to season. So you can see that we're right on target for charges for services at just over 25%. And then similar to the water department, we break down our expenses by department. So there's a sewer operating department, a sewer administration department, and then we have sewer core or construction expenses. The capital outlay we've expended this year is over budget, and that's due to the Wasserman project. And expenses for that are over budget due to the poor soils we encountered. And then the last utility report is for the stormwater fund. Again, charges for services are at about 25%, which is where we'd expect for the year. And our expenditures are fairly low through the first quarter of the year. And this is due to most of our work is done in the summer months. So those numbers will go up as the year goes on. And the ending cash balance we have in this account, we are accumulating for future stormwater maintenance needs such as pond cleaning, dredging, disposal of materials. From year to year, the MPCA looks at their different requirements for disposal and cleaning, and we expect that those requirements will get more stringent as the years go on. Page 7 shows our quarterly utility billing report. This is a report we have done in the past. I'll just touch on a couple of highlights for this. This is for services from January through March. We did add about 39 new accounts due to new construction. Overall water consumption was slightly higher than it was in 2013. And our receivables are up slightly compared to 2013. However, they're fairly consistent from year to year. Other than that, there's not much new with the utility billing. So we'll go on to page 8. And this is a new report showing our cash balances by fund. In the past, we've shown all these. However, we've never grouped them according to fund type. So this new report breaks it down by fund type. At the top, you can see the general fund and how our balance has gone down as the year has gone by. Again, we rely on the property tax for a majority of our funding for the general fund. The next category of funds is special revenue funds. And we just have a few of these. Typically, money that goes into these funds is designated for specific revenue purposes. The next category down is our debt service funds. Anytime the city issues bonds, we set up a debt service fund to properly account for the revenues coming in, such as property tax, special assessments, tax increment financing, and then the bond payments for those bonds. The next category down shows the various capital projects funds we have. And again, a number of these are restrictive to a very specific purpose. Other ones are a little more generic, such as the Park Improvement Fund. One item I will highlight on here is Fund 808, which is our long-term street maintenance fund. The city has been setting aside funds for this for the past 4 years or so, and this is set aside for future capital overlays that we expect to begin in 2016. The next category down is our various enterprise funds. And then the very bottom, we have a couple of other funds. We have our Revenue Stabilization Fund, which is funds that have come from accelerated building permit revenues over the last few years. It's designed as a contingency or rainy day fund in the event we have a shortfall in revenue or an unexpected expense or other use the council deems appropriate. And then finally, just on the far column, I've put an asterisk by the different funds that rely on the property tax as their main revenue source. Then on page 9, this is a new report also. This is showing the city's cash and investments as of the first quarter and a breakdown of how they are invested. The city pools all of its cash together for investment purposes and then allocates interest earnings and market value changes according to the average fund balance for the quarter. You can see from the allocation that the city has the majority of its funds invested in certificates of deposit, and that's followed closely by the checking account. With the building projects we have planned, as the CDs mature over the next few months, we will place those funds in the checking account. So next quarter, we'll probably see a significant increase in the portion of the investments that are in the checking account. We also have a little bit in money market savings and then some state bonds and a Fannie Mae note. The bar chart below shows the various maturities we have. For the most part, we invest in CDs with a maturity of 2 years or less. The longer term investments would be the Fannie Mae and the state bonds that are over 5 years. And that corresponds to the interest rate below where we're earning 5 to 6%. Both of those investments are kind of locked in for the long term, and I think we'll keep them there as long as we can because I don't foresee interest rates getting up to that level for a while. So our CDs don't earn that much interest, but they're doing okay given the current rate environment. When we do invest, we first look to safety, then liquidity, and then yield. So. Page 10 is also a new report we're doing, and that's just a status on the various capital improvement plans and where we're at for the year. I'm not going to go over each one in detail. I'll just touch on a couple. For the Public Works Capital Equipment Fund, we had 2 items that we had planned to purchase this year, and both of those are on hold right now. One, because of the price quote came in higher than we expected, and then the Tool Cat on hold pending the building construction and what we decide to do with the dump truck. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, under the utility funds, we are over budget on the Wasserman Sewer Extension Project, and that was due to the poor soils, so. And then finally, the last report in here is a report of our bonds outstanding as of the beginning of the year and as of the end of the quarter. And what we've done is we've outlined for the bonds outstanding, which ones are going to be repaid from current city funds versus which ones will be repaid with funds from a fiscal agent. The city has done a number of advance refundings over the last few years. So what happens in that case is the city refunds a bond, but the call date is in the future. So when we bond, we put money aside with the fiscal agent, and that money waits until the call date. In this case, we have 3 of those outstanding, and those will come due in the next few years, and then we will not have those bonds on the books anymore. The chart at the bottom is just trying to show where our current issue debt is, and that's the yellow shaded area, and the purple area shows our proposed debt. The proposed debt would include any debt for the new public facilities and also proposed debt from street reconstruction projects. The city expects to do street reconstruction projects for the next probably 7 or 8 years, just depending upon timing. But you can see that even with the issue in new debt, our overall debt will decrease each year going into 2032. And with that, I'll take any questions on the financial report.
Council, questions?
So if you recall, in the second graph there, if you run that back to 2010, what the debt level was in 2010, do you recall?
I would have to go back and double check. I know back, and I'm not sure when the refund has occurred, but we did have more debt for both the water treatment plant and the rec center on there.
Just recalling, I'm going by memory, I want to say it was like 38 or 39 million. I think it'd be interesting to see if you could rerun that graph and run it back from 2010, showing the continuing pay down of debt over time.
Sure, I can add going back a few years.
Thank you.
Yeah, go back as far as you have to, within reason, to get to the maximum level
Okay.
we're at. Now, again, I ask council's impression of this. In the past, that we had monthly reports that we'd touch on in the first quarter, early months, that was not terribly enlightening. I, for one, think this is a much improved situation. And take comfort in the fact that the Finance Committee is reviewing all of the data monthly. What you're proposing to do is bring this to the council quarterly.
Well, I think the intent was that the Finance Committee would just look at the quarterly also, and that Don and I and other staff members would look at the monthly.
So you don't trust us?
No,
I misspoke. That is,
Okay.
yeah, we're going to just do it quarterly. Any other questions or comments?
I think it'd be interesting to see, to continue on a monthly basis with, I don't know if you call it stoplighting or what, but, or exception reports back, but given that we'll review this quarterly on a monthly basis, come to us, here are exceptions based upon previous trends, things like that.
Am I hearing a nodding of the head?
Yes, we can do
Yeah.
that.
Thanks,
Any
Kelly.
further?
Just a comment, and it's just, I really appreciate this, and I appreciate you with the graphics as well to tell the story in both ways. I think by quarter gives us a better picture of what's happening, because to your point, Mayor, sometimes a month would go by, and because we didn't get hit with a payment or we didn't get hit with a revenue, you're not sure what you're looking at. And so this gives a nice picture of what's happening in each chunk, so thank you.
If nothing else, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, the donation.
I move that we approve resolution number 1439, a resolution accepting the donations as follows. Walter and Marilyn Pemberton for $50 designated to the fire department. Herbert and Norma Heist for $20 designated to the fire department. And Chad and Holly Macy for $150 designated to the fire department. Our thanks goes out to those who donated the money, and thank you to everyone else.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the donation. Next on the agenda, we have a couple of public hearings. Don, you want to kick it off, the first one?
Yeah, Mayor and members of the City Council, the first public hearing tonight would be the report and on West 78th Street, which our city engineer, Kara Guerin, will be presenting. It is a public hearing. I have received a couple of slips for people who would like to speak. So when we get to that point, they'll have that
Okay,
opportunity.
in the process, we'll go through Carol, make her presentation, then we'll invite anyone to come up and speak.
Correct.
Okay? Kara?
Good evening, council and audience. This is a public hearing for the 78th Street and Cochia Lane Street and drainage improvements. This is essentially the same PowerPoint presentation that I provided to the City Council when you ordered the public hearing and that I presented to the neighbors at the neighborhood meeting earlier this year. But I'm still going to go through it in great detail. The project location includes 78th Street from Highway 5 over to just west of the Madeline Creek development. We reconstructed this street at the same time that the Madeline Creek development went in back a number of years now. So this is a continuation of that project, plus improvement of the gravel section of Cochia Lane from 5 down to 78th. Our study did look at completing the improvements from 78th Street down to the cul-de-sac by Holy Family, but we concluded that that needs to occur at a future date when development potentially occurs around these properties. Extensive easement acquisition would be needed to construct that improvement, and you've just been through that process for the Wasserman Trunk Utility project, and that adds a lot of time. So the existing condition, 78th Street, if you've had an opportunity to drive it recently, is in really poor shape. The road is showing signs of subgrade failure basically throughout the entire length of it. It's essentially beyond its useful life. Cochia Lane is gravel. It's oddly in a slightly better condition. We did run a water main down this road in 2001, so a pretty decent section was put back in. But it is gravel and creates a lot of rutting and dust problems for the people who live adjacent to it. We do get calls from folks looking to find out when we have this programmed in our capital improvement program to get upgraded pretty often. So just what I just spoke about, the pavement's past its useful life. There's inadequate subgrade soils to support the street. There's poor drainage along both roads. And then another big issue we get calls about is that there isn't any pedestrian facilities on either road. The roads are narrow. They don't have paved shoulders or any kind of shoulder area. So people who are walking, running, biking in the area have really nowhere to go when cars come. So that's a concern that we hear. So our proposed improvements are to reconstruct the street, both streets, basically with a similar footprint to what we did to 86th Street back in 2010. So it would be basically a 28-foot wide street with a shoulder, with a trail, an 8.5-foot wide bituminous trail along one side of the street. So both along 78th Street and along Cochia. Our feasibility study has that trail placed along the north side of the road, but the actual location really won't be determined until we get into design and have a topographic survey and can figure out which side it fits best on. Certainly the north and east side makes a lot of sense in the area where development is going to occur, because then that trail will be accessible to all those homes too. And it's a little bit easier to get the grades to match in when you've got new construction going on. So that would run the length of the project. Because we are increasing the width of the road from its current narrow condition, we would be required to construct a stormwater pond to meet Minnehaha Creek Watershed District requirements. So this plan just drew a pond on this big vacant developable parcel. But ideally, what we would like to see happen from an engineering perspective, the council saw a concept plan from a developer 2 weeks ago or a month ago, within the last month I think it was, and we've spoken with the property owners, the developer, and the developer's engineer about incorporating our stormwater into their plat so that it can be better accommodated in an appropriate location. The road would consist of our city typical street section for a 9-ton road, so there'd be 2 feet of sand, 8 inches of class 5, 3.5 inches of asphalt. There'd be drain tile located underneath this sand section to provide a drainage way for water that gets into the road. It gets into the sand section, and then it gets into the drain tile and is carried away to the storm sewer system. This is a very important element to our street projects to make sure that they last. Roads in the city of Victoria that don't have this street subbase underneath, we found that they aren't even lasting the 20 years that they were intended to. We have heavy clay soils, and when water gets down beneath the road surface and gets trapped, and we have winters like we had this last winter, then you're seeing a lot of heaving, and then the road cracks and more water gets in, and then it freezes and more problems occur. So important piece. And then an 8.5-foot bituminous trail with a 5-foot clear zone next to the trail. The project financing, the trail under our special assessment policy is 100% a city cost. These are collector roads, so a portion of the project cost would be paid using state aid funds that we receive every year. So the city gets a very small portion of gas tax dollars get distributed to the city that we're only allowed to use to reconstruct roads like this. And we have to meet certain standards then when we reconstruct the roads in order to get that money. The money is housed in a construction account with the state of Minnesota that then, once we build the project, we'll submit bills to them to get reimbursed. They have to review our plans and make sure that the project meets their standards, but what they would be requiring wouldn't be anything different from what we would build a collector road like this too. So the remaining costs, the remaining street and storm sewer costs would be assessed. 50% of those costs would be assessed to the benefiting property owners, consistent with the assessment policy. And then if we decide that we want to do any repairs to the sanitary sewer system or the water system, there's sewer and water in the area, and oftentimes Public Works will have us replace valves before we build a new road surface over it. We don't want to have, valves are things that we end up having to fix very often, so we try to get those replaced before we put a new road over it. The sanitary sewer also gets televised, and if there's any spot repairs that need to be made, we include those. And that's funded using the city sewer and water funds that Kelly was speaking of earlier. So the accessible properties for this project, over on this part of 78th Street, there are a number of single-family houses that have direct access to 78th Street. So under our assessment policy, they would each be assessed 1 unit for their portion of the project work. Over here, though, we have large developable properties that are currently functioning in an ag use There's one little single-family home here. This property is owned by the school district, and this property is owned by property owners who are in the audience tonight. So what we ended up doing was coming up with what an equivalent unit would be if we had this same sort of layout along the whole road and along Cochia. How many units could they have? So we also looked at it as a front foot method and essentially reached the same conclusion. So the report stuck with the unit method. So with that, we came up with an assessment amount of approximately $11,100. So for this property owner, their assessment would be 13 times that number. And for this property, their assessment would be 7 times that number. So it is a significant cost for those people. The assessment would be levied over a 15-year period at typically what we've been seeing for interest rates. This would be what their annual payment would be for 1 unit. There is the ability to defer special assessments. So this slide just summarizes the criteria that's available for deferment of special assessments. That wouldn't happen until the final assessment hearing, which I'll cover when that is at the schedule. But if anybody's interested in this option, they should contact the city clerk to get information about it. The maximum deferment time period is 15 years. Interest is accrued, and these are the criteria when payment becomes due. We do have a unique situation, though, here because we have all that undeveloped property that I was speaking to, both the school district's property and then the property to the north. The city's special assessment policy does provide that the city council could elect to defer the assessments on the undeveloped land for any specified length of time that the council would choose or until the property is developed. The city council wouldn't be making that decision until the final assessment hearing, which happens after the project is complete. But based on my conversations with the property owner, certainly for the large property that's had the concept plan that you looked at before, if for some reason that development wouldn't get through the process or wouldn't get approval for some reason, we have the density issue that we're working with them on, it would be my recommendation to the city council that you consider deferring the assessment on that property until the property develops. Then the property owner can include that in their negotiations with a buyer of the property that they have to pay that special assessment. Otherwise, I think it creates a pretty hefty burden on property that's just sitting there in egg condition today.
Carol, we've done this before.
We haven't had a situation like this before in any of our special assessment projects. They've all been typical, but that's the reason it's in the policy, because we knew there would be certain circumstances. The cities do this often. It isn't extraordinary. I think that the one amount, I suppose you all probably already did the math, but for the large property that was 13 units, it's $144,000 is the assessment. So, the city would be carrying that finance because you wouldn't be getting that cash in from the assessment annually to pay down that debt. But once the property developed, then you would get that money to put towards the project. In terms of a project schedule, so originally this project was planned for 2014 construction, but when we got through the feasibility report and realized that we would need to have stormwater ponding that would require us to acquire easements from the property that's going to be developed, I need more time to work through that process. So what I'm proposing is that we'll complete the design here from sometime between now and December. I'd like to get the consultant working right away so we can identify for sure what we need for stormwater. So we have that information either as we work with the developer for that property, or if it looks like development isn't going to occur, then we can evaluate with the landowners what might be a fair way to work through what to do with the stormwater. They of course would have to be agreeable to that, so we would work with them on it. The project would be bid then in early January, and construction would be primarily completed in summer of 2015. Typically, we wait to put the second lift of asphalt down until the next year. The final assessment hearing on the project then wouldn't happen until fall of 2016, and the assessments would be levied starting in January of 2017. I did hold a neighborhood meeting on March 20th. There were a number of neighbors in attendance. I have not heard from any of them since that meeting, with the exception of the owners of the developable property who we've talked with a couple of different times. Don and I also did meet with the school district to make sure that they understood what was happening. So I think that I haven't heard from anyone, so I don't know what that means. But the property owners for the developable property are here tonight, and I will let them speak for themselves. The next step then that we had to do was we had to solicit proposals for engineering support to complete the project, which is, the process is described in your staff report. We did receive 4 proposals for the project from 4 different engineering firms that are outlined here. Bolton & Mank, Stantec, TKDA, and WSB and Associates, and those are their total dollar amounts. Remember, these are proposals for professional services, so we aren't bidding this work. We aren't obligated to give the work to the low bidder or the lowest price. So your my staff report outlines the different criteria that we look at when we're reviewing the proposals. So some of the items included that we look at are the project team qualifications, with a focus on a project manager who's capable of leading and delivering a state aid street improvement project. So you want a designer that's designed state aid street improvement projects before, because the last thing you want to do is get your state aid submittal in when the plans are all complete and have the state reject them because they don't meet certain standards and start over. We also look for a demonstrated understanding of the project and an understanding of the critical success factors, understanding the scope of work and roles and responsibilities of the consultant. We also pay attention to the responsiveness and collaboration skills demonstrated during the RFP submittal process, and then certainly the engineering fees. We look at not only what the total fees are, but they have to provide a detailed breakdown of the different work task scopes, and we take a close look at which level of personnel is doing the work and whether or not we think they have the right amount of hours in the task to do the work. Since I've designed a number of these projects myself, we have a pretty good handle on how much these tasks should take. So we reviewed those proposals, and my recommendation to the City Council tonight would be that we would award the work to Bolton & Mank with their total fee of $87,102 for the work. And with that, I will take any questions the council has.
Kara, I had a couple questions about the road itself, and then also about the note about the 4/5 majority being a council-initiated project. Maybe you can start with that. Can you expand on that point a little bit?
So under state statute, if the residents had petitioned for this improvement, so we have a process that exists through statute and through our assessment policy where residents can petition for an improvement, 35% of the impacted property owners can petition for a public improvement. In that situation, only a 3/5 majority vote is required to move a project forward, to order the improvement. Because this was a council-initiated project, a 4/5 majority is required to order the improvement.
Thank you. Then with respect to the road, do you anticipate, other than traffic due to any potential new residential construction, do you anticipate any changes to kind of the traffic patterns in either the speed or the volume that would use 78th Street due to it being an improved road? And then part B of that is, do you anticipate a traffic light at the intersection with Bavaria Road and now or in the foreseeable future?
So in terms of traffic volumes, I don't foresee them increasing significantly on the road until this leg of Kachia were to go through. Once this leg goes through, it makes another entry and exit way for Holy Family and for these neighbors down here. Right now they have to go back down to 18 and then over to 11 or over to Bavaria. So I do think, and I could go back and look at our comprehensive plan to see what the projections are for this road when that goes through. In the short term, it would be development driven once there's a whole bunch of houses here, and I don't, Holly's probably over there somewhere, I can't remember how many units they were looking at, but certainly traffic will increase as the result of there being more houses there. Speed is always a concern. We wouldn't be proposing any changes in the speed limits out there. I suspect that because the road's in pretty rough shape, people maybe drive a little bit slower on it. But maybe the neighbors have different experiences of what they're seeing out there with traffic. That is one of the reasons, though, that I didn't propose a wider street. I went with the narrowest street we could put in there and meet standards, but then put the pedestrian trail there. I wouldn't want to do that roadway without the pedestrian trail, because we need somewhere safe for the pedestrians to be using the roadway that doesn't put them in direct conflict with the road. Traffic light, I don't foresee there being a traffic light at 78th and Bavaria, even when this road would go through. But I haven't specifically looked at that intersection at all.
Thank you. Do you anticipate any traffic calming measures as part of the design?
It certainly would be something that we should consider taking a look at, particularly at this intersection. There might be an opportunity here. I have to figure out what state aid standards will allow associated with that. I don't know how narrow. The fact that we reduce the width is already a traffic calming measure in and of itself. I don't know that we can choke down significantly narrower than that without creating a safety issue.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions?
I got a couple.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kara, can you just talk about the trail connections to Highway 5? Well, we actually have trails that, end on Highway 5. Are we encouraging bikers and people to walk across Highway 5, and is that a safety issue if so?
I wish I had a better aerial. So this trail would connect into a trail in Madeline Creek that then goes up to the intersection of 5 and Bavaria. And that intersection was improved in 2012 to include the push-button light crossings and crosswalks. When our Arboretum Trail gets constructed, then this summer, these people would be connected to the Arboretum Trail, which also is a safer connection to the regional trail. So my preferred route for people would be that they would come over to the intersection, go up, cross at the controlled intersection, and then go up Rolling Acres to get on the regional trail and then come back downtown that way. Mm-hmm. That's not going to stop people from coming up here and darting across Highway 5 to get down to the regional trail just off Park Drive. It's just a short little stint down the hill. The Park and Rec Director was disappointed in having to delay these improvements because getting a trail connection back this way towards Holy Family and then also south to the rec center would be a nice long-term connection.
So will the trail actually go from Blacktop to the Blacktop of Highway 5, or will there be 30 feet of?
There isn't any gaps. MnDOT filled what would have been the gap as part of their improvement project.
Okay. And then my other question is there any chance that either the state aid money won't come through or could be redirected or something, or the school district money not coming in or being redirected?
So we already have the money in an account in our name. We accrue it annually, so we've been saving it up over time for this project. So I've only included the funds that we'll get through 2014, and we've already been told how much we're getting. So That's a pretty secure funding source. We technically could borrow more from the future if we wanted to, but we're going to have Marsh Lake Road at some point in the future that we're going to need funds for, so unless there's big surprises, I don't know that I would be recommending that. The school district is assessable, just like any other property owner, so they'll be faced with an assessment and it'll go on their taxes and they have to repay it.
How much money accrues annually in that project?
I want to say it's about $150,000 per year. Yeah.
Somewhere in that range?
Yeah. I have a little spreadsheet that I could send you that shows that.
Could you please?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, I was hoping that maybe there's some residents here tonight who can tell us how they feel.
Well, by happy circumstance, tonight, this issue is scheduled for a public hearing, so I'll take a motion, please, to open up the public hearing.
I move we open the public hearing.
Second? I'll second it. The public hearing is now open. If anyone wishes to address the council on this topic, please feel free, come to the podium, state your name and address, and let us know what's on your mind.
Council. My name is Joyce Burrow. I live on 78th Street. My husband and I have lived there for 42 years, and we are greatly anticipating the improvement of 78th Street. But my sister and I own the farmland on Cochia and 78th, and it's not yet developed. We don't have a strong developer. It's in the process, kind of hanging in limbo. But as two landowners, we are not in favor of a lot of assessments to pay for this project. So that's where we stand.
Just a question. You heard Kara talk about the deferment policy.
We did. So does that mean that the project still goes through, but the payments are deferred, or what is it?
Correct. So the project would still be constructed, but you wouldn't have to pay the city until, assuming the council would approve this, until a development would get approved. So it would be part of a development approval.
So with that, we kind of lose some land if this project goes through with the walking paths.
So the trail would be in city right-of-way, so it wouldn't be on your property at all. It would be fully within right-of-way that we already have. There is the issue with the stormwater pond, though, that we would have to figure out some fair way to address that situation that you would need to be agreeable to. And if we couldn't figure out a plan, then we wouldn't be able to implement the project.
That's kind of where we stand.
I think basically just exactly what my sister said. If it can be deferred, that's what we would like to see. But what we'd really like to see is that the land be developed in what probably is going forward right now, which has been presented before this. So if it's developed, obviously the assessments can be worked out if the land is sold.
Can I just clarify, if I may, which part of the property is that, the upper north part that we saw the development for last meeting? Okay.
78th and Cochia.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? So we get hit with assessments, two different ways.
Well, I think it's a reasonable policy that allows the city to defer this for a property that's not developed, and it'd have to come to the council, I assume, and we'd have to vote on it at the time.
Well, I guess my question is, given that this is council initiated and requires a 4/5 council vote, is that the only point that requires a 4/5 vote, or does the deferral,
That's
something like that?
the only point that requires a 4/5 vote.
Thank you.
Do you have any other comments? I think you've made your point fairly articulately.
Thank you.
Anyone else that wish to address? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've closed the public hearing.
I'll just add, Mayor, that we did have pretty good attendance at the neighborhood meeting, so they were provided this information. They were told at the neighborhood meeting that the public hearing would be tonight, and we sent them a letter. So They got the notice that was in your packet, but we also sent them a letter explaining, because sometimes you get a notice and you don't know what it means. So they've been informed, but I haven't heard from them.
What was the general tone of the residents that attended?
Most of the questions I was getting were more construction related, looking for details on where the trail was going to be located, some of the timing.
More in favor, less in favor?
There was no
No indication?
indication either way. So, generally my experience is if people are opposed to a project, I hear from them. But
Just curiosity, show of hands, how many people in the audience are affected by this? Are you in favor of it? Yes, no?
Absolutely.
I heard an absolutely.
But we don't want to pay for it.
I didn't hear that part.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've closed the public hearing. Don, you want to go to the next one?
Your
Can
Honor,
I ask one question on this before we move on? So with the deferral, the two larger properties that they're still going to benefit from the project, and so my question is, do we still charge not knowing when, if ever, those will be developed? Do we charge something because their property still is benefiting? I'm just thinking that the residents to the west still doesn't seem fair that, everybody will benefit, it's just a matter of how much, that everybody should still be paying something.
I'll have to take a look at the policy to see whether it would allow us to defer a portion of the assessments. Maybe you could consider assessing them for one unit, but defer the other 13 or 12 units to a future date or something like that. I'll have to look into that, but that's really the policy decision that the council will have to grapple with in making that decision.
Okay.
They still are paying you, it's just when they're
Just
paying
when.
you.
Right.
Right.
Okay, Joe?
Thank you.
Mayor, two decisions the council needs to make. One is approval of the resolution ordering the project and the professional services agreement per our engineer's recommendation to enter into contract with Bolton and Mink.
So we've got two. The machine shut off.
All right.
So just one more question, why now? 'Cause I remember when this originally came up back in January, we talked about there's a lot going on and maybe we should defer this for a bit. So why now?
I would just reflect back on the council workshop that we had a month ago, whenever it was.
Unfortunately, I missed that.
On streets.
Sorry.
We have a lot of streets that we still need to deal with in the city, and frankly, not doing a project in 2014 as a result of me learning that we need easements really kind of shifted everything out a year. I wasn't entirely comfortable with that, but it's the right decision for this project, and we do have a lot going on this year. We're all pretty busy with other things going on. But this road's in really rough shape, and the people who live by it have been putting up with its brutal condition for a very long time. It's one of the ones I get calls on from people saying, what year is it scheduled for?
Is there an impact on the plowing and maintenance due to the condition of the road? Is it difficult to maintain this road?
Yeah, and they have to put a lot of money into filling potholes that just pop out again. We do like some sections of patching. The gravel road takes a lot of time and effort too. And we don't have a lot of gravel roads left in the city, so we're not experts in gravel road maintenance since we don't have miles and miles of gravel road to maintain. So I do think it's a challenge.
Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my only thoughts here on this is that I would be a little worried about that if we approve this, that we'll be doing, or hopefully won't be doing something out of the ordinary, allowing, the property to the farmland to the north to develop so that we can get our money, faster. So that's the only thing I would just want to make sure that, when we review those plans that, if that money is deferred, for a certain amount of years, that we're not approving something just so that we can refill.
Approving the development. you mean?
Yeah, the development, just that the development should stand on its own.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 1440, a resolution ordering the improvement and preparation of plans and specifications for the 78th Street and Cochia Lane street and drainage improvements.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We've approved the plans and specifications. Now we can go to the second.
Mayor, the professional services contract, as our city engineer recommended to enter into with Bolton.
Where is that
and-
on the agenda?
That's just directly following the
The resolution.
the
It's in the same
resolution.
recommendation.
What am I missing?
It's still in the same agenda item. It's
Same
just-
agenda item.
It's not a separate item.
So it's just the next paragraph following the
Oh.
resolution? I can,
I'll make a motion that we approve professional engineering design and construction support services contract based on the city engineer's recommendation as presented tonight.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the professional engineering, the services agreement. Now we'll go to, now we can go to the parks.
Mayor and members of the city council, tonight is the second reading of the ordinance amendment allowing for wine and beer in the parks. This was first heard at our last city council meeting, and a recommendation by the Park and Rec Committee to make the city code consistent with what our practices are. So tonight is a public hearing allowing wine and beer in the city's parks. Our Park and Rec Director is here to answer any questions you may have, and if not, I would suggest that you open the public hearing.
Any questions or comments? We'll open the, can we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've opened the public hearing. Anybody wish to address the council on the subject of alcohol in city parks? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We've closed the public hearing. Somebody want to make a motion to adopt amendment? Maybe I will. Adopt amendment Chapter 4-1 Alcoholic Beverages and Chapter 17-5 Parks and Recreation Intoxicating Liquor in Parks.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We can now drink beer in the park. Under the amended agenda, the topic of Mount Olivet Rolling Acres has been deferred until, or tabled until June 23rd. We'll go to unfinished business. Don, item A, City Hall and Public Works Facilities Financing Alternatives.
Mayor and members of the city council, I think this is the item that the majority of the people are here tonight. We have a lot of experts in the room tonight. First of all, I'd like to say that Jenny Bolton, our bond attorney, is here to answer any questions that the city council may have regarding specific items with the bonds. Tammy Umdahl is here from Northland Securities, who is our financial advisor, and she's the one who prepared the schedules, and she'd be able to address any issues you may have about either lease revenue bonds or the GOCIP bonds. Kelly Grinnell is going to give a brief presentation on kind of the financing and where we're at today. But what I would like to do is just kind of back up and talk about where we've been, how we've gotten to where we are, just to provide a little history. And there's a handout that was on the back table, and it's before the city council tonight, really to talk about what's the need of the facilities. And this discussion has been ongoing for several years. I know that I have worked on it since June of 2008 for both the Public Works building and the City Hall. The buildings are certainly outdated. We have a number of environmental concerns in both buildings, and the buildings are too small to accommodate the needs of our citizens today and into the future. So with that, I just want to start by saying we have looked at a number of financing alternatives over the past several years, and Kelly will get into the details, but it includes bonding, a combination of cash and bonding, as well as all cash. At our last city council meeting on April 14th, the city council held a public hearing to allow for the issuance of general obligation capital improvement bonds. That, the statute provides for a reverse referendum within the particulars of the issuance of those types of bonds. The reverse referendum requirement provides for 5% of the ballots cast, signatures totaling 5% of the ballots cast at the last election to bring forward a petition to the City Council. The total number of signatures that would be required for that petition was 216. We have received a petition, a valid petition, that would, it had 345 names. There were 7 that were disallowed, so 338 names on that petition. So tonight, the decision before the City Council, after presentations and discussion, is not about whether or not the buildings are going to be constructed, and I'm going to spend a little more time talking about that, but the actual type of financing that we're going to proceed forward with. The 2 alternatives that are presented include lease revenue bonds, combination of cash and lease revenue bonds, or a combination of cash and general obligation capital improvement bonds. I want to bring up to speed as to where we are at with the actual buildings. The City Council, over the past several months, we've fine-tuned the details of the 2 facilities, including the design, the locations, and the costs. Our construction manager issued bids. We went out for bids. We've received bids. The City Council has awarded bids. Virtually all the contracts for the construction of the 2 facilities. The one contract that was awarded tonight was a rebid for the electrical that was received, and it was a great decision on the council part to rebid that, and that we saved $135,000. The contracts are signed. The groundbreaking for both facilities is on June 2nd. The first one out at the Public Works Building at 6 o'clock. The second one at 7 o'clock for the City Hall. Work has started primarily on the Public Works facility. There were a number of trees that needed to be moved. The construction trailer is out there. I do know that staff, primarily Kara Guerin, our city engineer, and Maki, our director of Public Works and Park and Rec, are working out the specifics of starting that construction. That construction is expected to start literally right after the groundbreaking on June 3rd or that week. So again, what I want to do is at this point kind of turn over the financing piece to our finance manager, Kelly Grinnell. I may add something to that, but certainly the opportunity for the council to ask questions of the experts who are here tonight to discuss the financing alternatives.
Thank you, Don. Kelly?
Okay, so as Don had mentioned, throughout the process, we have looked at a number of different financing alternatives for the project. And one of those was just to issue bonds. The amount we had come up with was about $5.5 million in proceeds. The primary reason for looking at this was the ability to offset our debt service payments and the levy associated with that to minimize the impact to taxpayers in the initial years of the bonds. So that was one scenario we looked at. We've also looked at just using cash reserves for the project. We do have about $1.7 million that we've set aside in the Capital Facilities Fund over the past several years. And we have about $600,000 in our Revenue Stabilization Fund. And then we looked at some of our other funds and availability. Our 2 biggest funds after that would be our Water Fund and our Long-Term Street Maintenance Fund. However, given the projects we have planned for the Water Fund, the water storage, and then with the Long-Term Street Maintenance Fund, the need for overlays beginning in 2016, it was determined that that was not a feasible option either. And what it really came down to is that a combination of using bonds and cash reserves made the most sense. We would use the cash reserves from the Capital Facilities Fund and the Revenue Stabilization Fund, and then bond for the rest of it. So like I'd mentioned, the Capital Facilities Fund, there's just over $1.7 million, and the Revenue Stabilization Fund has about $600,000 in it. That could be used for the Public Works building, and that would require the issuance of bonds for the City Hall and Library building in the amount of $2.9 million. And that would be the bond proceeds. The actual bond amount would be higher based on the type of bonds issued and the issuance costs. So in looking at the total uses of funds for these projects, the project costs for the Public Works are $2,283,500, and the City Hall project cost is $2,677,000. These numbers are updated with the rebid of the electrical, and they also include the moving of the Public Works farther back on the site. The land costs for these projects for Public Works, $776,060, and for City Hall, $410,290. The total uses of funds is estimated at $6,146,850. I would note too that the total project cost is under the project budget of $5 million. In looking at the sources of funds, like I'd mentioned, the use of funds from the capital facilities and revenue stabilization funds totals just over $2.3 million. We've also sold some land. The proceeds from the Rhapsody site is about $250,000, and this should not say City Hall, it should say the 89 acres, I apologize for that, it was $719,381. So the total there is just about $1 million. Combining that with the bond proceeds of $2.9 million, we have total sources of $6,198,730. The sources does exceed the uses by about $50,000, and for right now, that's just a contingency amount. We will bond for what we need. The amount we have on there is a maximum, not a set amount. So as Don had mentioned earlier, there are two different bonds that we're considering. The numbers presented tonight are based on the market rates as of May 22nd. These rates do change daily and could go up or down. But for this chart, the bond proceeds is the same under either bond scenario. It's $2.9 million. As you go down the different line items, you can see what the differences are between the two bonds. The cost of issuance are slightly higher under the EDA lease revenue bonds. And then there's also a debt service reserve required with EDA lease revenue bonds. And the amount that we would set aside at the bond closing is $221,930. This amount would be set aside in an escrow account, and it would earn interest. And at the end of the bond term, it would be used to make the final roughly 1.5 payments on the bonds. The total par amount of the bonds varies. With the CIP bonds, it's $2.975 million compared to $3.23 million on the EDA lease revenue bonds. The estimated average coupons is 2.81 for the CIP versus 3.39% for the lease revenue bonds. The net principal and interest payments over the entire life of the bonds is just under $4 million for the CIP bonds and about $4.2 million for the lease revenue bonds. And then at the bottom, you can finally see what the net average annual payment is. It's approximately a $23,000 a year difference. So in looking at how does the issuance of these bonds impact the median valued homeowner, for 2015, the median valued homeowner would be someone with a home valued at about $350,000. The second column to the left shows what projected taxes are before any bonds are issued. These projected taxes are based on our city's long-term financial plan, which incorporates general fund levies for general operations, the rec center levy, and the various debt service that we already have in place. You can see that between 2014 and 2024, taxes are projected to already increase modestly from 1,127 this year to 1,293 in 2024. If the city does issue CIP bonds, the section in blue highlights what the taxes would increase to under the issuance of those bonds. The second column shows the annual tax increase compared to the prior year. And you can see that it fluctuates. One year it's 37, the next year it's actually projected to decrease about $10. The highest year shows a $49 increase. Overall, that average annual increase amounts to about $20 per year. And then the final category shows the tax impact for issuing lease revenue bonds. Again, the biggest increase would be that first year when they would go up about $45. And then the amount of increase or decrease is about the same as it is under the CIP bonds. So the overall taxes would go from about 1,127 in 2014 to 1,347 out to 2024. And with that, take any questions or?
Mayor, just a couple of comments. One of the things I just want to back up. So a couple of things. With the reverse referendum requirement, at this point, since we have received a valid petition, in order to issue general obligation CIP bonds, we must hold a referendum, and that referendum must pass to issue those types of bonds. No such requirement for the lease revenue bonds. The City Council does not need to act on the petition. You can direct us tonight to issue lease revenue bonds. And as you can see from a financial perspective, there's a difference. Certainly less than what we had originally projected with our financing plan a few months ago. The decision to hold the referendum will need to be made tonight if the City Council wants that issue decided at the August 12th primary. We must get all the paperwork to the county by the end of this week in order to do it. If the council wants to hold a referendum and we miss that deadline, the next opportunity would be in November, which kind of pushes out the decision several months. Again, there's certainly finance risk in terms of interest rates and that sort of thing. If the City Council chooses to do the referendum, it pushes out the kind of the decision 2.5 months. If the referendum fails, your choice at that point is to issue lease revenue bonds, or as Kelly had mentioned previously, we can use cash balances in some of our funds, long-term street maintenance fund and our water fund, which is not what we're recommending. So again, it just goes back to the decision to issue lease revenue bonds. You can make that decision tonight. Direct staff to prepare the paperwork. If you wish to go to a referendum, there's a resolution that's included in the packet, and we could proceed that route. Again, knowing that if the referendum fails, we'd be back to square one in August. So with that, I think we have our experts here tonight. If there's any questions about that, certainly.
Do any of the experts, so-called, want to make a statement of any kind? I thought what we'd do, if not, I thought we'd listen to the residents and hear what the residents have to say. You've got indications that there are at least some who wish to speak?
Yeah, Mayor, I was just wondering if the council had any questions that they wanted to get answered before the residents.
Okay.
Kelly, in the schedule there, can you explain a little bit the difference between the years 2014 and 2024? The increases are due to at least two factors. One is an assumed increase in property values, and another one is a change in tax rate. Is that correct? Or is the tax... Help me understand what the difference between the two, because to say that taxes are going up solely because of this project or these projects is probably not correct.
That's correct. If you look at the green column, the before bonds column, you can see that the tax amount would actually go down in 2015, and then it kind of goes up most of the years until you get to about 2019, then it dips again. And these amounts are based solely on what we have projected for a general fund levy, what we think we're going to get for new homes. We're projecting 75 new homes a year. It includes the existing debt service we have for street reconstruction and also for proposed street reconstruction. Under that scenario, the tax levy decreases from where it is right now. We're at about 38%. I believe it goes down, and I've got the number here. It would go down to about 32%.
In 2024?
In 2015, and it remains constant for a few years and decreases to actually under 30% in 2024.
So most of the increase is coming from property tax. Is that correct? I mean, if we look at just before bonds,
Yep.
most of the increase that's represented there is from property values, not tax rates within the city. Is that correct?
Yes, because we are assuming that property values will rise each year by 2.5%.
So we're actually funding these buildings while lowering the tax rate.
In the green category, if you look at the blue where we issue the CIP bonds, or the purple where we'd issue the lease revenue bonds, taxes are going up more than they would under the before bond scenario.
Let me say it another way. What is the tax rate in 2014 under both the CIP and lease revenue bonds as compared to the tax rate in 2015 and 2024 in those scenarios?
Okay, so for 2015, the projected tax rate is 32.18 if we did not have bonds issued. If we issue the bonds, 2.975 million in CIP bonds, it goes up to 33.8. Or it would go up to 34.04 with the lease revenue bonds, which is still lower than the current tax rate.
So taxes are going down, but not as much.
Right, the tax rate is going down.
Tax rate will.
Mayor, can I,
Difficult, sorry.
Mayor, can I interject just some? Here's another way to look at it. If you isolate the issuance of the bonds, so if you only look at that piece, the increases in taxes is about, Kelly, we calculate about $56, $58, somewhere in that, if we just isolate the issuance of the bonds. Why there's such a variation is really comes down to our operations. So you'll see in some years when it goes up, we're adding a staff person, or we're buying a dump truck, or we're issuing debt. And in those other years, we're really not adding costs to our operations. So what we've tried to do is balance the facilities, the cost of the facilities, with the provision of our operations to moderate the overall tax impact. And that's what both of these scenario does. As Kelly has indicated, an average tax rate based on our set of assumptions, not a tax rate, an average tax increase over the next 15 years of $20 or sort of $24 or $27 is a pretty good indication of the work that we've done to try to moderate the impact of taxes and, with the council's direction. So hopefully that kind of explains it a little bit better.
Other questions?
I guess
No?
my comment is when I look at that, it just doesn't make sense to me because In 2014, the services that I receive should be the same as they are in 2024. So, even though the rate might go down, we're still getting, it's more tax. It's whatever, $170 before we even bond. So I guess I understand that the rates will go down, but again, if the economy tanks, I can guarantee you that we're going to get our money, and the rates are going to go way up so that we pay for this. So I think it's good that we're planning ahead and trying to show something, but to me, when we have all of these extra houses and people coming in to split the cost of all of the services that we get, it just seems odd to me that that cost would go up.
Don?
Oh, yeah, Mayor and Council, I'm going to try not to make this too complicated. If we go back and just isolate the cost of the bonds at, say, $58, over time, because as we add new residents, the cost of that bond to the specific taxpayer will go down because we're spreading it out over more homes. From an operations standpoint, our costs are increasing. If we didn't issue debt, our costs are going up anyway, because as we add people, we add streets. Just from an operational standpoint, we add parks, we add trails, employee costs, it all adds up. Kind of the key from our perspective is understanding the total amount of taxes that we collect is going to go up over time. What we try to do, again, is to moderate the impact of the individual taxpayer, which takes into consideration our operations and the growth of our community. So so hopefully that was a better explanation.
Other comments, questions before we... Don, you got some names of some people who...
I do have some names, Your Honor. I suspect there are other people in the audience who may want to speak who haven't filled out a form, so we need to accommodate that as well. So I'll just start. First one I have is Peter O'Gorman.
Good evening. Peter O'Gorman, 729 Gannon Way. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm here tonight to talk about the petition. Several weeks ago, the Council unanimously voted to issue capital improvement bonds for $5.615 million. With that bonding method came an opportunity by state statute for citizens to appeal to the Council for a reverse referendum by way of petition. I'm aware that you received a valid petition, and it had more than an adequate number of signatures. Mayor, you threatened your constituency more than once that you would vote to change the bonding mechanism, which would raise the cost of the capital improvement projects over the course of the bonding term by more than $600,000 if citizens merely exercise their right to the petition. Again, you all voted unanimously to allow for capital improvement bonding. When you heard that the petition was circulating, you explicitly stated that you had the 3 votes you needed to change the bonding mechanism and intended to do so when the petition got to your desk. In doing so, you would set aside the desire of the 344 people who signed the petition and countless hundreds or thousands, we don't know, of others who were not contacted to sign to have their say in the debt that you intend to put us in. Members of the Council stated that people were obviously being misled or didn't know what they were signing. I was one of the many people who talked to my neighbors here in Victoria, explaining the petitions and its intention. It's important that you know that after you made those threatening remarks, I passed your statements along to each and every person that I spoke with before I asked them to sign. I told them what you said to the camera here. If you sign, know full well that the cost will go up. You know what an overwhelming number of them said? They said, where do I sign? We're not the ones who've been misleading people. We're not the ones who are misrepresenting. And it's clear now that you intend to use lease revenue bonds if the Council votes to hold a referendum and it doesn't go the Council's way. You stated several times that we live in a representative republic and not a democracy. We all know that. This country was founded because of taxation without representation. Because of unfettered bureaucratic power, there are systems to check unbalanced power, like capital improvement bonding and the statutes that accompany them here in the state of Minnesota. By voting to use capital improvement bonds, you all voted to allow your constituency the opportunity to petition and hold a vote. That is a check on your power to tax us, so that we might have a direct and, yes, democratic vote on how you spend our money. But it is an absolutely useless tool of the citizens if the results are thrown out. I understand that it's perfectly legal for you to change the bonding mechanism that you intend to use for these projects, and it's clear you intend to avoid public input and possible reversals of votes that you've made. We all know that to change municipal bonding strategies for these reasons would not be the right thing to do. One might ask, what are the reasons then? Well, we plainly see that you're in a bind. You've made commitments and you see no way out, even if it means acting against those who voted you into office. The people who entrusted their hard-earned money to you want to have a say in how it's spent, and they expect you, our representative elected officials, to abide by the outcome. The onus is on this body to explain to the people why their vote will mean absolutely nothing on August 12th, if that's the voting date, if the outcome is not in the council's favor. Now, I don't know how each of you intends to vote this evening with regard to this matter. I will just say that if you vote to allow a referendum to take place, then throw out the results if they don't go your way. You will galvanize all of those people who believe in government transparency and fiscal responsibility. And we will remember the decision and who made the decision every time we pay our taxes. The argument has never been about whether or not we need adequate facilities for our city employees. The issue has always been about the process by which this council has chosen to solve the problem of how we might acquire satisfactory facilities. And once again, a lack of public transparency and input resounds yet tonight with the council. The agenda packet for this meeting not only shows that you intend to disregard the outcome of an election that your constituency has petitioned for. Not only that, but you intend to significantly drain the coffers of the city to reduce the amount of bonding needed to be issued. And you intend to vote for the brand new financing plan this evening without any input from the public and hardly any knowledge by any of us. This council's veiled decision to attempt to reduce the amount to be borrowed does not negate the desire of your constituency to have a vote on whether or not bonds in any amount are issued. If the voting results will be tossed out and you intend to finance these projects with lease revenue bonds, you will be taxing us more and you will not be representing us. Thank you for your time.
May I ask you a question, Mr. O'Gorman? Can you come back up, please?
Thank you.
Just two questions.
Questions, but I sure you could.
Okay. Two questions. How do you propose we solve the original intention for these buildings is to solve safety and process issues? How do you propose we solve those two problems?
The citizens have not been given adequate information to be able to make those decisions.
Have you visited the Public Works facility and have you sat in City Hall when the chemical smell is present?
From what I understand, no, I haven't been here when the chemical smell is.
Have you visited the City Hall?
From what I understand, it's been kind of remediated by removal of soil outside the front.
You didn't answer my question.
Sure I did.
Have you visited the Public Works facility?
Yes, I said I did. Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Sure.
Have you seen the plastic that's up in the city offices now?
I have the plastic that's up in the city office.
Thank you.
Don, is this,
Is the answer no?
Oh, I didn't hear what you said. The
There's
that's in the
plastic
city
up
offices?
blocking off 2 workstations in the city hall offices.
No, are we allowed to go back there?
Anybody who hasn't seen that,
Finish, and then I have a couple of comments.
anybody who hasn't seen that, I'm prepared, we can declare a 5-minute recess and you can go back and take a look.
Well, I'm doing some construction in my basement. I've got plastic up there. What is the plastic for?
Mayor.
I'm not kidding. I mean, if you want a
Mayor,
legitimate
Don,
answer,
excuse me.
what's the question?
Mr. Gorman,
Yeah.
please, there were rules of conduct that the city council adopted that allows individuals to speak on items that aren't required as part of a public hearing. That includes no clapping, be respectful, those sorts of things. So I would encourage the audience to kind of follow the rules of conduct. The question about the plastic, this really isn't the time to have a debate with the residents regarding the condition of the facilities. I would say, though, that because of the well-documented petroleum smells within the building, I made the decision last week to wall off a portion of the building so that staff could work literally without being sick. So what we had to do is we walled off 2 cubes and relocated the people within the small space. So that's what the plastic issue is about. And I would encourage the city council to move on and listen to other comments from residents who wish to speak.
Thank you, Peter. Next.
Thank you.
Next. Randy Miller, do you wish to say anything?
My name is Randy Miller, 1776 Stagger Lake Lane. I'm here on behalf of the Victoria Business Owners Association. Mr. Mayor, council members, and staff. On behalf of the Victoria Business Association, we publicly strongly support the location of the proposed City Hall with the addition of the library. The opportunity for new development will establish and encourage future business economic development. The primary goal of economic development retain existing businesses, recruit new businesses, expand the tax base, increase employment, and foster economic growth in Victoria. The city's strategy is to create and sustain a diversified business community that will prosper and expand. Since our inception, that is the Victoria Business Owners Association, our priority has always been, continues to be, an organization focused on promoting business and community. Our organization will continue to be an advocate for future economic development that contributes to the growth and vibrant business community. When it comes to opportunities for success, exciting existing growth and potential of life, there's no better place than the city of Victoria. Once again, my name is Randy Miller, President of the Victoria Business Association, and I have been president since January of 2011. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. John?
The next slip I have, Tom Funk. Mr. Funk.
Good evening, everyone. Tom Funk, 7985 Acorn Circle, right up here in D.R. Horton. I've spoken to this council a number of times. I want to address specifically the petition and some of the allegations as far as we somehow misled or cajoled, or somehow the people that were signing it didn't know what they were signing. I give a lot more credit to the residents of Victoria to understand specifically what we were doing. And I can tell you that as we got organized and we sent everybody out, we specifically told them to just present the facts. I can tell you that the people I spoke to basically, and I'm paraphrasing what I told them, but I basically said the city's councils approved capital improvement bonds in the amount of $5.6 million. By statute, Minnesota statute, we're allowed to collect signatures in a reverse referendum, and if we collect enough signatures and the petition is verified, we can force the city council to hold a referendum before they're allowed to issue the capital improvement bonds. That is what I told them. I did not lie to them. We did not mislead them. When people asked, we talked about specifically that this council threatened to move to lease revenue bonds if it's successful. And I think Peter did a good job explaining that. So I'm going to keep my comments short. There's a lot of people that want to talk. I do want to talk to one thing. Specifically, I think it's critically important to understand that as this process unfolded and as I collected the various petitions from all of the people that were out canvassing the neighborhoods, some very interesting statistics were collected. I don't have exact numbers, but I think, and I'm sure the city staff can confirm that these numbers are close. We have roughly 7,300 people that live in Victoria. Of that, there's roughly 4,500 that are eligible to vote. I can tell you that when we went out, we talked to roughly 400 people. And if you talk to any statistician, in a population size of 4,500 that's eligible to vote, and we talked to 400, that is statistically relevant And you can take those results from that group and extrapolate that out to the larger population with a plus or minus of 3 or 4%. So what we did find of the vast majority of homes that we knocked on, roughly 2/3 of the people weren't even home. We never even got a chance to talk to them. Of the roughly 400 people that we talked to, 85% of them signed the petition. 10 to 15% of them either said they didn't want to get involved or they wanted more information and they wanted to do some research. The remaining percentage, which is 2 or 3%, said they supported the city council's position. Even if you don't believe those statistics, or even if you think I'm 10% off, at an absolute minimum, 3 out of 4 people in Victoria want the right to vote on this bonding. I believe this council should go and approve the capital improvement bonds, and I believe that they should go ahead and abide by the decision of the people that you're supposed to represent. 2 final comments. I have never been opposed to the facilities. I have seen the facilities. I've also looked at specifically the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency report on this facility, and I looked at it today. And in the first 20 pages of that report, there were 9 places in that report that it specifically said that there was no measurable contamination in this building. The only mention of any contamination which in that report specifically stated was minor was the evacuation that was done on the southwest corner here, that everybody knows was about 5 tons of soil was taken out. I encourage everybody to read that report for yourself. That report shows that there's no problem inhabiting this building. I am not denying that there's somebody who smelled fumes. All I'm telling you is people have come in and done reports that are supposed to be experts, and the experts don't find anything. That raises in my mind a serious question. The other question is the fact that the process that was used to get to the decisions that the council has reached, I have serious questions, and most people know I filed a suit that we're going to resolve those questions about. One of the things that I would say that the city council didn't do enough due diligence on is using the Victoria Rec Center as a location for the new city hall and putting it up there. I understand that at least 2 council members are active members of the Victoria Business Owners Association with their personal businesses. And Mr. Mayor, when I asked you that question originally, you never answered the question, so I don't know if you are or not. 2 other members, Councilmember Pavoco and Councilmember Strigo, did in fact answer, and they are not active members of the Victoria Business Owners Association. I think there's a conflict of interest there. You can't be voting on something with the VBOA when they want it downtown. You should have noted that publicly, and you should have recused yourself from those decisions. But that's another issue for another day.
Thank you. Don?
Yeah, Mayor and members of the City Council, just a point of clarification. On April 14th, the City Council held a public hearing as required per the statute, not to issue the bonds, but to have the right to issue the bonds in some denomination less than what the public hearing was held for. So the actual amount and timing of issuing bonds has not been decided. So with that, I suspect that other people within the audience wish to speak. I don't have any more slips, but you may want to just orderly call people up to the podium to voice their concerns.
Yeah, I mean, let's hear from, there are a lot of people here, and you gave up an evening to visit us. Let's hear what people have to say. Anybody else who wishes to address the council, we'd love to hear you.
Thank you, city staff, city council members, and honorable mayor. My name is Mary Matheson. I have served this great city of Victoria as a citizen's mayor for 4 terms, 1994 through 2002. I own and operate Counselor Realty of Victoria. I lease space from the Hartmans in the Clock Tower building for the past 8 years. I am an owner of the Creamery building, currently occupied by Inky Brewery. The city of Victoria has needed a new city City Hall and Public Works building for the past 15 years. The process started when I was the mayor and has continued through the years. The current facilities are outdated, inadequate, and deficient in many ways. They are no longer suitable for our city staff and our growing community to operate in. The top priority and vision of the Victoria residents has not changed. They want a vibrant, strong, viable downtown. 3 critical anchors make this happen: a city hall, a post office, and a grocery store. They are the pillars that drive traffic and people into the downtown. With the City Hall being built in conjunction with the library in the downtown, a grocery store will soon come again. The new library will bring all age groups daily to our downtown. Many of the residents, including our young families and our seniors, are so excited about getting a library in the downtown. The city provides the brick and mortar. Carver County, the entire county, pays the rest, all the ongoing operations and staffing. Your vision to swap land in the downtown demonstrates your foresight to future generations. The City Hall and Library on a very special piece of property, so your citizens can come and enjoy Victoria's greatest assets: the lake, the park, the trail, the future amphitheater, and lakeside patio. The City Hall and Library are the people's place. How wonderful to have them on Victoria's greatest assets. Thank you, Terry and Jerry Hartman, for working with the city to swap your lakeside property with the city-owned Johnson property to make this vision a reality. The city's process have been transparent. You, City Council and staff, have provided the citizens with open houses, tours of the current facilities, feedback and comment sessions, public meetings for 2 years. You have created a budget for the projects, addressed the city's current and future needs. Our local paper, the Victoria Gazette, and the Chanhassen Villager has continually informed the public. Cable TV has aired the meetings. Your due diligence and hard work has resulted in final building sites, final building plans, construction bids, coupled with very favorable interest rates, and a scheduled groundbreaking for June 2nd, 2014. You were elected based on your credentials, with the confidence of your voters to do the hard work on their behalf, and you have. On behalf of myself and many of your voters, I want to thank you, our elected council members, our mayor, and the Victoria City staff for your hard work, your steadfast leadership, and your commitment to complete this process. Cross the finish line. Vote yes on the EDA lease revenue bond and build these long overdue, much needed buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Please move. Don?
Your Honor,
You don't have any more?
I have nothing else to add.
Does anybody else wish?
Mayor, City Council, I'm Rayanne Vandeputte. I'm at 8400 Allegheny Grove Boulevard. I don't have anything prepared. I can't say I'm on one end or the other, and I can't say I have a recommendation for you. I'd just like to share, maybe from I'm going to call myself a regular citizen who hasn't been involved one end of the spectrum or the other, and I just am chatting with my neighbors. I've attended several of the meetings. I feel as if you've all done a great job at just notifying us of what's going on in the paper. There's been a ton of meetings. I've come to several of them, and they're attended similar to this maybe. We have 7,000 residents, probably 4,500 adults, and we really don't have a tremendous amount of people here today. I've been on boards before, and I know two things bring people to meetings, and it's food or it's a problem. And I know there's a lot of people here for a general meeting, but I know that you get anxious by who comes to the podium, but I just want to say, in talking to my neighbors, people just aren't really nervous. And even I have a couple neighbors that signed the petition, and afterwards, in talking with them, they didn't quite understand. I think they were explained, and I really respect the citizens who came forward in the petition, because I think it's great that we have that process available. I really do. And I don't even have a recommendation. I'm just going to say that financing a project this big is really big, and not a lot of people in the audience have done something like that. Maybe many of us have financed a $500,000 home. And I think what happens is people don't really understand. You guys have had meetings for hours and hours and hours and hours about this and still struggle a little bit. And when somebody comes to your door for a few minutes, I think it gets hard for them. In fact, a couple of my neighbors have said I didn't quite understand what it was about. And I'm not even here to represent them. I'm just here to say that I would be really concerned about it going to a referendum, and I'm not giving you a recommendation either way. But I say that because I think citizens would be confused, and I know we can educate them. And I'm an election judge, and I'll say people come confused about senator races and who's in their Senate, which you think that would be, we advertise a lot about those kind of things. So I get concerned that our citizens will be more concerned or confused and just not really, I don't know. I think they'll get more disappointed because a lot of people, I think, are thinking this has to do with just not building, which it really isn't. So I don't have a recommendation. I'm just sharing my feedback, and I want to thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is Linda McNulty. I live at 8834 Point Vista Drive in the grand town of Victoria. I'd like it to continue to be grand, and I'd like you to know, all of the city council people, that my vote in November last election counted for something. It counted for what I wanted to give you the power to do, that is to run our city. And I would like you to continue to do that. I believe in the democracy and people speaking up. I don't always feel happy about how it's done. And in this particular case, you can count me as not being happy. But Mr. Funk can extrapolate all he wants. I cannot sit down here and believe that 2 to 3% of the people in Victoria are the only ones that back up our city council. So I just want to stand clear on it. I give you the job to do. The people that voted you into office gave you the job to do. I would like you to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. I saw another hand in the back.
So I'll just leave it at what's been said since I came in late.
Okay. Any other comments?
My name is Louise Lehner, and I'm considered, my husband and I, a re-entry into the beautiful city of Victoria. And I can tell you that I spent some time here a couple of years ago, and I know how cautious you all are, and I know how diligent you are about doing the right thing. So, just for my sake and the people that I know, you are doing the right job, and I commend you. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Still time. All right, well, having heard from, from some in the audience, I think it's time to hear, maybe you want to hear from us, and I'm going to start out.
Close it.
Well, wasn't a public hearing, so there's nothing to...
No. I support the lease revenue bond internal cash financing approach outlined in Resolution 1442 for the new Public Works facility in City Hall, and not to submit the capital improvement plan bond question to a referendum later this year. My rationale is based both on principle and substance. First, this council was elected by the residents of Victoria to make decisions on their behalf. Some decisions are routine and/or easy, such as paying the city's bills on time. Other decisions are complex and/or controversial. Such decisions require considerable study and sometimes the courage of one's conviction to make a tough and potentially controversial call. Such is the process in a representative democracy. The residents of Victoria have entrusted this council with the duty, the responsibility, to act on behalf of their long-term best interests. Residents assume that the council thoroughly studies the issues and makes the most informed decision based on the facts involved. Such a process has been followed in recent memory with the bond financing of major capital projects, such as the $8 million water treatment plant, the $6 million recreation center, and a number of road reconstruction projects. It is the process that this council has and will continue to follow in replacing our grossly substandard public works facility in City Hall. No one understands the issues better than the members of this council, which has studied this issue for over 2 years. The residents are counting on us to enact the best long-term solution consistent with the real will of the people. There's also a strong substantive basis for proceeding with lease revenue bonds to fund the 2 new facilities. This vehicle is a common financing technique for public buildings and was recently upheld by the Minnesota State Supreme Court. Our bond council has identified 24 recent instances where Minnesota cities have used lease revenue bonds for this very purpose. It is also very common to refund the bonds at a lower interest rate after an initial period of 5 to 7 years, further lowering the overall cost. So where are we in this process? We have studied this issue in great detail for more than 2 years. The buildings are necessary. The project cost is under budget. The contracts have been signed. The buildings will be built. The only question is, how do we pay for them? The approach I recommend is to use a combination of available cash and debt. It is to use the roughly $3 million in available cash to fund the Public Works facility and $3.2 million in lease revenue bonds to fund the new City Hall. Interest rates remain low, at least for the moment, and the significant growth in new residential housing units means the cost is spread over a larger base. There is an incremental cost to the property tax payer using lease revenue bonds, but it is minimal. Only $45 a year in total, and only 8 more than the other bond alternative for the median value home in 2015. It's time to make a decision and move on. We need certainty. In the past year and a half, Council has conducted 24 votes involving these 2 buildings and discussed the issues involved in Council meetings another 23 times. This Council has other important issues to deal with, including the fire department staffing, the number of waste haulers we license and the damage caused to our streets, maintaining our stormwater ponds, finding an acceptable developer for the 13.5 acres site in downtown, and the vacant Fresh Season building, among others. Finalizing this financing approach for our 2 new facilities is in the best interest of the residents of Victoria. With that, I'm going to make a motion to approve Resolution 1442, a resolution authorizing lease purchase transaction related to the construction of a City Hall.
I'll second that.
Now for discussion.
When you take public office, you're never sure exactly what issues you'll face or how they'll turn out. And each of them is a bit of a learning process. Some, such as this, are lengthy and complex if you choose to engage. If you want to do it well, there's a lot that you have to learn. When we first met as a council after I was sworn in January of 2011, it was at a strategic planning session. And at that time, these two buildings were identified as having severe, irreconcilable issues. The kind that even if you threw a lot of money at them, were not going to solve the problem. They could never be what we, the citizens of Victoria, needed them to be. Their time had passed. It was also clear that it was our responsibility to fix it. We may not have known much more than that at that time, but it was a starting point. As a council, we have spent the last 3.5 years refining our understanding of the needs, the options, the pros and the cons. We studied together various sites throughout Victoria and even considered putting the Public Works facility in Laketown on land that the city already owned and would have eventually been annexed into Victoria within maybe as long as 15 years. But that option proved to be too costly. In addition to the operational costs and challenges of locating the city, key city maintenance personnel and equipment so far from the residents that they serve. So the search continued, and I'm pleased to say that we've selected a site which could be paid for by selling that Laketown property. We avoided placing the facility in close proximity to a significant number of residences, and yet it is close to those of you that are served. All of us are served by their work. I'm confident that the council's focus on fiscal responsibility gave us the most appropriate sites for the lowest total cost, both acquisition and operational. The council has been unanimous about the need for these facilities. There's never been a debate on that point. Most members took personal time to visit other projects to learn about the costs, the construction methods, the materials, government and public processes, accountability and transparency requirements, all with the goal of getting the best facility on those sites. A facility that will meet the needs of Victoria residents for at least 10 to 15 years. This effort has resulted in a $3 million cost savings. The council, working with residents, the city staff, property owners, found a path to make the highest and best use of multiple parcels of land, eliminating a blighted property in favor of a commercially developable site, and paying the entire land cost for the new city hall with TIF money. This could only have been possible with the right vision and willing parties to execute. To be sure, we have been challenged along the way, both internally and externally. We've challenged each other to find a better way. And the outcome will be a better, more cost-effective outcome, better facilities. And I'm grateful for the inputs and those challenges that we've received. One of those was to pay for what we could pay for with cash. So now the plan you've heard tonight reflects some of that as evidence of our responsiveness to the community. The council considered a range of typical, appropriate legal financing options to fund these facilities and to avoid adding cost after all this effort and delay to these projects. To live up to the responsibility that the citizens have entrusted to the mayor and council, I will support a cash plus lease revenue bond financing approach.
This is an emotional issue. In times of emotion, I've found it most beneficial to rely upon some advice from an old friend. Facts are our friends. It's hard to divorce yourself from the emotion and focus on facts, but that's something I try very hard to do. Even in light of that emotion spilling over into all of our personal lives, which as an individual I find completely unacceptable and reprehensible. We started down this path to focus on 3 issues that the city faces. One was safety, 2, of process movement, 3, of process improvement. We have never wavered from those 3 objectives. Safety. We have an obligation to our citizens and to our employees that work for the city to provide a safe place to work. It is an obligation of this council. It is an obligation of every voter in this city. Second, process movement. In order to provide safety, it's important that we move the processes from their current facilities to new facilities that enable those safe processes. Then where possible, because of the new facilities, we have an opportunity to improve those processes, which result in cost savings to you, the citizens, to us, the citizens. So, divorcing the emotion, the personal attacks, I come back to the facts, and they are our friends. Safety, process movement, process improvement, those are things that we have to pursue in order to make sure that Victoria continues as an ongoing concern. I personally feel that this is one of the pivotal moments in the city where the decisions made here will dictate the future of our city in either a positive or a negative way. And I will vote for the positive in this case. These buildings are needed.
Lonnie, you want to chime in?
I won't say much more because my esteemed colleagues have already said most of the pieces that I would agree with. This has been a journey. When I first took office, I know originally there was plans for the council to have decided and moved on funding and actually building the buildings. I believe it was in December of 2012. And I was sworn in the next meeting in January 2013. It's interesting to be a council member and to be on this side of the table. You are expected to be a fortune teller in terms of being accurate on every number, every percentage point of an interest rate. You are expected to be able to assure with 100% certainty that every decision we make is the best ever. We are asked to look and know the law of managing and governing at every step from the moment we walk in that door and we put our hand and we take that oath. And I have to tell you, it's not that easy. It is something you learn every step of the way. You rely on trusted people around you to make sure that you're doing what's right in terms of learning and the law. And you do what you think is best for the citizens and for the city. I think sometimes people forget we live here too. We pay the same taxes. We are responsible for the same pieces that everybody else is. We are not exempt from any of it. So every decision we make is not only for ourselves, but for the city. And we know that every step of the way. Many of us research, many of us call and spend hours with staff, making sure we understand all sides of the issue, and we've done that every step of the way. I would tell you in my journey in looking at these buildings and this project, I came across a small city of 2,300 people not very far away from us. It's the city of Winstead. And in 2006 and 2007, they built a public works, a city hall, and a lakefront promenade, all for the tune of $4,643 million. They knew at that point in time that if they didn't build it then, they would run into many issues, both very similar to what we're running into, buildings that are no longer serving the needs, and other components. They also knew that in 2013, if they waited until then, it would be $6 million plus change. And we're able to do it for less than $5 million in terms of the buildings themselves. They also knew if they waited till 2021, they'd be looking at a $12 million price tag. We cannot continue to wait. If we continue to wait, we will see interest rates rise. We already know prices are rising. Those economy areas that are feeling better are beginning to see increases there as well. And so we have to make some hard decisions here. And we have to make sure we see to the future as best as our abilities as human beings, that we're making the right decision for the growth and the future of Victoria. We want to attract people. We want them to be here. We want them to see what is available for them. We want them to have the services that we're all enjoying, but to continue to see those services be there for them and grow for them as the city grows. So with all of that said, and what my colleagues have already said, I would also support moving forward with the lease revenue bonds.
Joe?
Mr. Mayor and council members, I was actually excited about coming here tonight because, you know, going from $5.6 million in bonding to now using some cash reserves and bonding for one of the projects, I thought, hey, this is good. We're moving forward. We're, you know, making the best of the situation. But I can in no way be in support of the motion on the table. I refuse to go against the will of the voters, the will of the residents. And if there's a valid petition, knowing what, you know, Mr. Funk and others have said about 85%, or, you know, we're ignoring that, and I don't find that to be acceptable. I'm a little skeptical of the downtown location, as I've said throughout this process. You know, the argument has always been that if it's downtown, we have this unbelievable amount of economic development that's going to happen. Yet, we've had no metrics that show any type of economic development, or, you know, anything concrete that shows, hey, we're going to have X amount of people come through, or, you know, the businesses are going to see an uptick. You know, and you talk about the 3 pillars of economic development downtown, and one of them has just crumbled. And I just don't see it. We've got multiple examples where this has not worked. The 13.5 acres, which I believe we've invested almost $2.5 million on so far, sits vacant. Nothing. That was done with the best intent. Yet $2.5 million of our money sits there vacant over there. So you might as well go use it and, I don't know, have a picnic out there. The field house, lease revenue bonds, I believe, is how that was financed. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I'd like to know how many people today would approve the field house. Again, if it's lease revenue bonds, which I understand is how it was financed, no.
Well, Kelly, just want to, because we looked at that, what was the bond?
The detail and park was lease revenue bonds, but the rec center was, it's revenue bonds, but not lease revenue bonds.
I'd like to know how many people today would approve lease revenue bonds for that project when it loses money every year. It has not made $1. Yeah, I understand it's an asset to the city, and maybe to the residents, but again, if we're going by past experience, I see 3 prime examples here of development, of bringing people into the city, and it's just doesn't happen. And, you know, we talk again about economic development. I don't know if we've noticed this, but the downtown area, again, it's a great downtown. People love it. People like being here because of that. But the footprint in our downtown is about the size of a Target in its parking lot. So if we think that putting 3 businesses down here is going to somehow create this unbelievable economic boom, you know, we're joking ourselves. To me, this is a hobby. We're not going to be, these projects will not pay 40% of our tax base. So to make the argument that, you know, this is all economics and we need it, and it's not true. And, you know, I just go back to the voters, the residents. People want to vote on this. You know, I thought we were doing a good thing by paying cash for the Public Works building, which is a pretty good building, and I think it meets our needs. But then to have to bond and then pay an extra couple $100,000 just so that we don't go to a vote is just absolutely ridiculous, and I'm not going to have any part of it. So I guess if me wanting to listen to the residents and their petition is wrong, I don't want to be right.
Any other comments? We have a Motion on the floor with a valid second. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
4-1. We've approved the joint lease revenue cash financing for the two structures. And just as a footnote, I would invite everyone, you heard June 2nd mentioned a couple of times, 6 o'clock at the Hartman Tree Farm site, the new public works site for the city of Victoria, 6 o'clock groundbreaking, 7 o'clock downtown at the Steger Lake Lane site. Reports of the city manager, any reports?
Mayor and council, nothing further to add.
Council members?
No report.
Take a motion to close?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We're closed.